Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. In this video, I'm going to use some sticker stencils to make a springtime card, perfect for a birthday or a Valentine's Day card. Hope you enjoy. So I used the Nature and Nurture collection of sticker stencils from Lavinia Stamps for this card. And at first I put the bird, which is facing the left, onto the card so that his tail is slightly off the edge right here. And then I used some russet orange and I diluted it a little bit in with water. I just put it in my lid there for now. And I painted the main body of the bird and his tail as well with this russet orange color. And right now it looks more of a yellow than an orange, but I will darken it as we go on. Then I used the graphite ink, also diluted with water, and I painted that over his feet, over his beak, and then the top of his head and down his back. And I used a little bit more of that russet orange just to paint over top of that to combine those two colors. But like I said, I will add more ink later on. Now before removing the mask here, I just used my heat tool and lightly blasted it with heat. Not enough to melt the stencil, but enough so that when I remove the stencil, I don't have any ink smudging around the bird. And then I'm going to use my heat tool to make sure it's completely dry before positioning the second mask. Similarly, this one is off the edge. His tail is off the edge of the left-hand side of the card. So I'm just going to do the same thing with the other bird using that russet orange again. And then the same graphite color on his feet, his beak, and then for some details on his tail. Now you can make any colored birds that you'd like, but I thought these colors worked really well for this springtime theme. And I really like how the russet orange and the graphite ink work so well together on this card. So I'm just going to hit that with my heat tool for a few seconds before removing that stencil as well. And then I'll make sure it's completely dry before moving on to the next step. Now I'm going to apply the other parts of the stencil, which are the shapes of the bird, over top so that I can mask them and then work on the background behind the birds. So for the background, I wanted it to be a nice spring color and not too dark. So I used one of the Lavinia Stamps Dinkles. This one is Lime Divine. And I just splattered it all around, focusing more on the middle of the card. And then I put some more, a little bit on the bottom and a little bit on the top. And then I used my water spritzer. This is like a mini mister. It's from Ranger. And it allows you just to put a little bit of water over your surface. And I just sprayed it over the masks. And then I held up my background so that I could continue spraying away from the birds and just have that ink drip off the top and the bottom of the scene. And just by turning the card, I'm making sure that not too much water pools under those masks. And then as I remove the mask, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I dry around those birds. Now because the Elements ink from Lavinia does react with water, there is a little bit of softening around the edges of the birds, but we'll fix that later on. So right now I'm stamping the Cherry Blossom stamp, and I'm using my acorn ink for this, so that they're all, the branches and the flowers are all that lovely brown color. And I'm kind of focusing on adding lots of twigs along the bottom, so it looks like those birds are sitting on a bit of a tree or a nest. And then lots of flowers around them on either side, and a little bit along the top. So I just want it to look like they're perched somewhere nicely while having a little bit of a chat. And I love how you can turn the stamp and just get a completely different look for it, and it helps to fill in the background of the scene. Next, I'm just going to darken up the areas that I've painted with that graphite ink. So on the beaks of the birds, on their feet, and along their backs as well. There's also a little bit of that graphite on their tails, so I'll just darken that to make it look more interesting. And as you can see, this makes a huge difference. And with the ink being dry from before, it makes that graphite even darker. And just to reiterate, that ink I have diluted a little bit with water. And that makes it easier to paint it on. And then once I'm happy with the graphite ink, I'll do the same thing with that russet orange ink, diluted with water. And just paint it over areas where I want it to be a bit darker. And I think it's good to paint over the areas where there's that graphite ink, just so that the two colors blend together. And as the ink starts to dry, it does lighten up a little bit. And it gives you that beautiful color on those birds. Now I'm just using a pencil here to draw in where I want the eyes to go, just so that I make them nice and round, which is harder with a paintbrush. And so I put them in the right place. And then I'll use that graphite ink just to color in their eyes. And I will add a little bit of white on their eyes later on, once this is dried. Now to color in the flowers, I used a bit of that russet ink, the russet orange ink, for some of the flowers. And then I thought it would be good to add some more color, some other colors. So I tried using one of my markers for this, my Copic markers, but because it was such a light yellow, it doesn't really show up that well. So what I ended up doing is using a few different Posca pens and going over those yellow flowers. But I left this in the video just to show you that if you do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can just color it in, color over top of it in this case. So I used some Posca pens for the leaves, and because I stamped the cherry blossom stamp in brown, I wanted the leaves to be a nice green color rather than a brown color, especially for a spring card. And then I used the yellow Posca pen for those flowers. And I also used a fluorescent orange Posca pen for some detailing as well. And then I also used a white Posca pen. But I didn't want to add too much color to those flowers because I want the emphasis to be on those beautiful birds in the middle of the card. And then I used my white Jelly Roll pen now that the eyes are dry, and just added 2 white dots just to help bring those birds to life. Now for my sentiment, I used a bit of a scrap paper and colored it in with that acorn ink. so it's a lovely brown color, which is the same ink that we used on that cherry blossom stamp. And I'm going to use this behind my sentiment. And then I want to stamp my sentiment, which is the one from Lavinia Stamps that says Art from the Heart. And I'm going to stamp that in the same acorn color, just on a bit of white paper, and then cut that out and glue it onto the acorn colored paper. And then once I secure this to a 5 by 7 inch card blank, I can add my sentiment. And I used double-sided tape as well as glue to make sure this was completely secured. And my sentiment, I used quite a wide border on that acorn colored paper, which I think looks really nice with those birds. And then I used my T ruler just to make sure my sentiment is nice and straight. And I didn't add a sentiment to this card because I haven't decided if I'm going to use it for birthday or Valentine's Day yet. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!